The call for soldiers. The war did not begin with a declaration. There are no warnings, no ultimatums, no first contact protocols gone wrong. It began with silence. The outer colonies of the Galactic Concord were the first to vanish. Entire systems, mapped, inhabited, thriving, simply stopped responding. Trade routes went dark. Communication beacons blinked out one by one, like stars dying in an unseen night. At first, the Concord assumed the usual causes: stellar instability, civil unrest, even piracy on an unprecedented scale. But as the reports accumulated, the pattern became impossible to ignore. There were no distress signals, no survivors, no debris, just absence. It was the Threx who uncovered the truth. Their crystalline fleets, capable of perceiving energy fluctuations across vast distances, detected something impossible in one of the lost systems: a star behaving incorrectly. Not collapsing, not expanding, but being consumed. A reconnaissance fleet was dispatched. It never returned. The data it transmitted before its destruction was fragmented, corrupted, and horrifying. Massive structures, neither organic nor mechanical, surrounded entire planets. Tendrils of blackened matter pierced crusts and oceans alike, draining them of all usable resources. Swarms of smaller constructs moved with terrifying coordination, stripping everything down to atomic components. And at the center of it all, something vast, something ancient. The Concord gave them a name: the Devourers. Panic spread quickly, even among the oldest species. The Devourers did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They did not even acknowledge the existence of other life forms. They simply arrived and consumed. The Concord mobilized. The Veil, masters of telepathic warfare, attempted to breach the Devourers' collective consciousness. They found nothing. No thoughts. No emotions. Only an endless, mechanical directive: consume, expand, repeat. The Drath, a warrior species that had never lost a war, launched a full-scale assault. Hundreds of warships, thousands of fighters, enough firepower to sterilize planets. They were annihilated in less than an hour. The Devourers adapted faster than any known system. Energy weapons were absorbed. Kinetic strikes were redirected. Even experimental weapons, banned for their destructive potential, failed to slow them. World after world fell. The Concord's vast territories began to shrink. And for the first time in its long history, the Galactic Concord faced something it could not defeat. In desperation, the High Council convened. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in a chamber that had once symbolized unity and strength. Now, it felt like a tomb waiting to be sealed. "We cannot hold them," one counselor admitted, their voice trembling despite centuries of political composure. "Every engagement results in catastrophic loss." "They do not fight as we do," another added. "There is no strategy to counter, no command structure to disrupt." "Then we must find one," a third insisted. "There must be a weakness." Silence followed, because they had already tried. Finally, the eldest among them, an ancient being whose species had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, spoke. "We are approaching this incorrectly," it said slowly. "We are not fighting an enemy. We are facing a force of nature." The words settled heavily over the chamber. "And how?" another counselor asked bitterly. "Do you propose we defeat a force of nature?" The Ancient One did not hesitate. "We don't. We survive it." That was the moment the decision was made. A galaxy-wide summons was issued. Every known species, every independent system, every civilization beyond the Concord's reach received the same message. The Galactic Concord calls upon all who can fight. We require soldiers, not for conquest, not for glory, for survival. The response was immediate. Some species answered with fleets, others with technology, weapons, or intelligence. Even long-isolated civilizations broke their silence to contribute. But it wasn't enough. The Devourers continued to advance. And then, the message reached a small, relatively new civilization on the edge of mapped space. Humanity. Compared to the ancient races of the Concord, humans were barely more than children. Their spacefaring capabilities were recent. Their colonies limited. Their history filled with internal conflict rather than interstellar diplomacy. Most within the Concord barely acknowledged them. Some didn't even know they existed. But the message reached them nonetheless. On Earth, it sparked immediate debate. Global leaders convened. Military analysts reviewed the data. Scientists examined the limited footage of the Devourers, searching for patterns, weaknesses, anything. The conclusion was unanimous. This was not a war humanity could win. Then we don't fight it, one leader suggested. We fortify. We prepare. If they reach us, we defend. And if we fail, another asked. No one answered, because they all knew the truth. There would be no defense. Humanity had seen extinction before, not as a reality, but as a possibility. It was written into their history, their science, their fears. Asteroids, nuclear war, climate collapse. They understood something the Concord did not. Extinction wasn't a battle. It was an end, and ends had to be prevented before they arrived. Days passed, then weeks. The Concord received responses from dozens of species. But from humanity, nothing. Many assumed they had chosen not to answer, that they would remain isolated, hoping the storm would pass them by. The Concord did not blame them. Then, without warning, a transmission arrived. It was simple, unadorned, direct. You asked for soldiers. We will send what is needed. There was no elaboration, no indication of what that meant. Still, the Concord took it as a sign of support. They added humanity's name to the growing list of contributors. And then they waited. Weeks turned into months. Human fleets never arrived. No reinforcements came. No further communication followed. Eventually, most within the Concord forgot about humanity entirely. They had more pressing concerns. The Devourers were approaching the core systems. Defensive lines were collapsing. Entire civilizations were preparing evacuation protocols that would likely fail. Hope was fading. And then, one day, everything changed. A Devourer fleet, mid-advance, unstoppable, overwhelming, simply stopped. Sensors across multiple systems detected the anomaly. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation drifted aimlessly. Energy signatures vanished. Command nodes went dark. Within minutes, the entire fleet was gone. No explosions, no debris, no explanation. At first, the Concord assumed a malfunction, some unknown flaw in the Devourer's design. But then it happened again. Another fleet, another disappearance, and another. Panic turned to confusion. Confusion turned to something far more dangerous. Fear, because whatever was destroying the Devourers was doing it without being seen, without being detected, without leaving a trace. The Concord searched for answers. They found none, until a final transmission appeared, originating from human space. Deployment complete. Nothing else followed. No explanation, no reassurance, only silence. And in that silence, the galaxy began to realize. They had asked for soldiers, but humanity had sent something else. The Annihilators. The first evidence came not as a victory, but as a mystery. A battered Concord cruiser, the Illira's Hope, drifted near the edge of a contested system. Its hull was scarred, its engines failing, and its crew reduced to a fraction of its original complement. It had survived an encounter with a Devourer fleet, something no ship was supposed to do. When rescue vessels arrived, they expected desperation, chaos, relief. Instead, they found silence. The crew was alive, functional, but shaken in a way that went beyond fear. They just stopped, the ship's captain said during debrief, their voice hollow. We were preparing for impact. Weapons were offline, shields collapsing, and then nothing. What do you mean, nothing? The Concord officer pressed. They froze. Every ship, every signal, like something switched them off. The report was dismissed at first as stress-induced confusion. No known weapon could disable a Devourer fleet so completely, not without leaving a trace. But then came the scans. Long-range sensors detected the drifting remains of the Devourer vessels. Not destroyed, not damaged in any conventional sense. Inactive, dead. A boarding team was assembled immediately. They approached cautiously, expecting traps, countermeasures, or the sudden reactivation of the enemy. The Devourers had adapted to every tactic the Concord had used so far. There was no reason to believe this would be different. But as they breached the outer hull of the nearest dreadnought, nothing happened. No resistance. No response. Inside, the air was cold. Still, the faint hum of alien machinery, once constant in Devourer vessels, was gone. The boarding team advanced. What they found defied everything they knew. The Devourers were there. Hundreds of them. Motionless. Disassembled. Not destroyed by explosions or energy weapons, but taken apart with surgical precision. Limbs severed cleanly. Core structures split open. Internal systems removed or disabled with an efficiency that bordered on artistry. This wasn't a battle. One of the team members whispered over comms. This was dismantling. They moved deeper into the ship. The damage became more focused, more deliberate. Key systems, navigation, communication, energy distribution had been targeted and neutralized. Entire sections of the vessel were rendered inoperable without compromising the overall structure. Whoever had done this understood the Devourers better than the Concord ever had. Then they found a recording, a fragment of internal surveillance data stored in a partially intact node. The footage was corrupted, flickering, incomplete. But it was enough. The video began in darkness. Emergency lighting pulsed faintly, casting long shadows across the corridor. The Devourers moved through the space, their movements erratic, almost frantic. Something had disrupted their coordination. Then the first one fell. No warning. No visible attacker. It simply collapsed. The footage glitched. And then, for a fraction of a second, something appeared. A shape. Humanoid. Cloaked in darkness. It moved faster than the eye could follow, a blur of motion and intent. Another Devourer fell. Then another. Each strike precise. Efficient. Final. There was no struggle. No wasted effort. Only execution. The figure advanced through the corridor, its presence barely visible against the dim lighting. Its armor, if it could be called that, absorbed the light, rendering it almost invisible. A faint glow emanated from its visor, cold and unreadable. It did not hesitate. It did not pause. It hunted. The footage ended abruptly. The boarding team stood in silence as the recording looped. "Play it again," their commander ordered. They watched it 3 more times. Each viewing revealed something new. The speed, the control, the absolute lack of emotion. This wasn't a squad, one of them said quietly. This was one. The implications were staggering. One entity had infiltrated a Devourer dreadnought, something entire fleets had failed to destroy, and eliminated it from within. Alone, the report was transmitted to the High Council. Within hours, similar findings began to surface. Another Devourer ship disabled in a distant system. Same pattern. Then another. And another. Each one showed the same signs. Internal neutralization. Precision targeting of critical systems. No external damage. No detectable point of entry. And in a few rare cases, footage. Always the same. A shadow. A figure. A presence that moved through the Devourers like a predator among prey. The Concord gave them a name. The Annihilators. The term spread quickly, whispered among military ranks and civilian populations alike. It carried both hope and unease, because whatever the Annihilators were, they were not like anything the galaxy had seen. The High Council demanded answers. A direct communication was sent to humanity, marked with the highest level of urgency. Explain the nature of your deployed assets. Provide identification, capabilities, and command structure. The situation requires full transparency. The response came hours later, as brief as the first. You asked for soldiers. We sent specialists. That was all. No data, no clarification, no reassurance. The message only deepened the uncertainty. Specialists, one counselor repeated, disbelief evident. These entities are dismantling entire fleets, and doing so without detection, another added. Our sensors can't track them. Our systems can't predict them. They operate outside of everything we understand. Then they are not soldiers, a third concluded. No, The ancient counselor said quietly. They are not. Silence fell over the chamber, because the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Soldiers fought battles. These things ended them. Reports continued to flood in. Devourer advances slowed, then halted. Entire fleets vanished before reaching their targets. Strongholds, once considered impenetrable, went dark overnight. And still, no one saw the Annihilators arrive or leave. They existed only in fragments of data, in broken recordings, in the aftermath of impossible victories. But their presence was undeniable. The tide of the war was turning. For the first time since the Devourers had appeared, the Concord felt something unfamiliar. Hope. But it was not the kind of hope they had expected. It was not built on unity or strength or numbers. It was built on something far more unsettling. Because deep down, every member of the Concord understood the same thing. Whatever humanity had sent, it was not here to fight a war. It was here to finish it. And if it could do that to the Devourers, what exactly could it do to them? What humans made? By the time the third Devourer sector fell silent, the Galactic Concord stopped celebrating victories. Because these were not victories. They were absences. Entire regions of space, once filled with hostile fleets, signals, movement, simply went quiet. No battles, no wreckage, no aftermath to study. Only emptiness. The High Council could no longer ignore it. Hope had turned into unease into fear, and fear demanded answers. A formal delegation was assembled. Scientists, military strategists, and representatives from the oldest species in the Concord. Their destination was clear: Earth, humanity's homeworld. For many within the delegation, it was their first time encountering humans directly. Expectations were mixed. They anticipated a militarized world, defensive fleets, signs of a species hardened by imminent extinction. Instead, they found something entirely different. Earth was alive. Vibrant oceans, dense continents, cities glowing with activity. Billions of humans going about their lives, as if the galaxy itself wasn't on the brink of annihilation. It was unsettling. How can they be so calm? One delegate asked quietly as their shuttle descended through the atmosphere. Because they are not fighting this war the way we are, another replied. They were received not by soldiers, but by officials. Calm, measured, almost indifferent. The delegation was escorted to a secure facility, far removed from population centers. No grand displays, no visible military presence, just a single structure, isolated and silent. This is where you'll get your answers, the human representative said. Inside, the air felt different, controlled, precise, every surface clean, every system optimized. It was not a place designed for comfort. It was a place designed for purpose. They were led into an observation chamber overlooking a massive underground complex. What they saw below changed everything. A devourer structure, or what remained of one. It had been captured, contained within reinforced energy barriers. Its once organic, once mechanical form now inert, dissected, studied. Surrounding it were humans. Dozens of them. Not soldiers. Researchers. Engineers. They moved with quiet efficiency, analyzing, modifying, testing. You brought one here, a delegate asked, unable to hide their shock. Alive. Not anymore, the human representative replied. But it was. The implication sent a ripple of unease through the group. You study them, another said slowly. We understand them, the human corrected. Before further questions could be asked, the lights in the chamber dimmed slightly. Observation window, Sector 3, a voice announced. The delegation turned. Below, a new scene unfolded. A containment field activated, revealing a smaller Devourer unit. Reactivated, restrained, but clearly functional. It moved violently against its restraints, emitting distorted signals that echoed faintly even through the chamber's shielding. Why would you reactivate it? One delegate demanded. To demonstrate, the humans said. The opposite end of the chamber opened. 5 figures stepped forward. At first glance, they looked human, but only at first glance. They wore matte black armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. No insignia, no markings, no visible weapons. Their movements were precise. Too precise. Synchronized without communication. "They are unarmed?" a delegate asked. The human representative did not answer. The containment field dropped. The devourer reacted instantly. It lunged. The distance closed in less than a second. And then, it stopped. Not because it chose to, but because one of the figures was suddenly in front of it. There had been no visible movement. One moment, the space was empty. The next, the figure stood there. Its hand, if it could still be called that, was embedded deep within the devourer's core structure. The creature convulsed. Another figure moved. Then another. The sequence was too fast to follow. Within seconds, the devourer collapsed. Inactive. Dead. The entire encounter lasted less than 5 seconds. The delegation stood frozen. "That is not possible," one of them whispered. The human representative finally spoke. "They are not soldiers." The 5 figures stood motionless now, as if awaiting further instruction. "They are not units, not troops, not even operatives in the traditional sense." "Then what are they?" another demanded. The human's gaze remained fixed on the figures below. "Their solutions." Silence filled the chamber. The explanation came slowly, deliberately. As you fought the devourers, you try to match them. Fleet against fleet, weapon against weapon, strategy against adaptation. The human turned to face the delegation. "We didn't." A display activated, showing data streams, genetic modifications, neural interfaces, adaptive systems. "We studied them, broke them down, found their patterns, their limits." And then, a delegate asked, though they already feared the answer. "And then we built something that operated beyond those limits." The figures below remained perfectly still. Enhanced physiology, reinforced skeletal structures, accelerated neural processing, direct interface with adaptive combat systems. Images flashed, training simulations, combat data, environments that no ordinary human could survive. "They don't think like we do," the human continued. "Not in combat. There's no hesitation, no fear, no delay. They're machines," one delegate said. "No," the human replied. "Machines can be predicted." The weight of that statement settled heavily. They learn. They adapt. In real time. Faster than the devourers can respond. "And how many of them are there?" another asked, their voice tight. For the first time, the human hesitated. "Enough." That answer did not reassure anyone. The chamber fell silent again as the delegation processed what they had just witnessed. These are not reinforcements, not allies, not even soldiers. They were something entirely new, something designed not to fight wars, but to end them. Finally, the eldest delegate spoke, and when the devourers are gone, the question lingered, unavoidable. The human representative did not look away. "Then they will stand down." It was the answer they expected, but not the one they believed, because as they looked down at the 5 motionless figures, perfectly still, perfectly controlled, they understood something with absolute clarity. Humanity had not just created a weapon. They had created something that could erase entire species. Efficiently, silently, completely. And the galaxy had asked for it. The silence after. The war did not end with a final battle. There was no last stand. No desperate charge. No moment where the galaxy united in a final, defiant act of survival. There was only silence. It began gradually. At first, the Devourers simply slowed. Their advance, once relentless and precise, began to falter. Fleets that had moved with terrifying coordination drifted without direction. Entire incursions stalled at the edges of key systems, as if something unseen had severed their purpose. The Concord watched, uncertain. Then the signals began to disappear. Not in bursts of destruction, but in quiet erasure. A fleet here gone, a stronghold there silent. A command node, once the nerve center of Devourer activity, vanishing from every sensor array without explanation. Weeks passed, then months. The Devourers did not regroup. They did not retaliate. They did not adapt. They simply ceased. System after system was reclaimed, not through battle, but through absence. Worlds once marked for consumption stood untouched, their skies eerily clear. The blackened constructs that had begun to envelop them were inert, lifeless shells of something that no longer existed. The Concord advanced cautiously. Reconnaissance fleets entered former Devourer territory, expecting ambushes, hidden reserves, some final evolution of the enemy. They found nothing. No resistance. No survivors. No trace of the vast, unstoppable force that had once threatened the galaxy. It was as if the Devourers had never been there at all. The High Council convened once more. This time, the chamber was not filled with fear, but it was not filled with relief either. "They're gone," one counselor said, staring at the data streams before them. "Completely gone. Extinction-level removal," another added quietly. "Across all known systems. No remnants. No signals. No recoverable structures." The words felt wrong. Extinction was something the Devourers had brought upon others. Now it had been brought upon them. "And the Annihilators?" the ancient counselor asked. No one answered immediately, because no one knew. Humanity had not provided updates. No mission logs. No casualty reports. No confirmation of completion. Only silence. Then, finally, a transmission arrived. Origin, Earth. Priority, absolute. The chamber fell still as the message was displayed. Threat neutralized. Containment complete. Further action unnecessary. That was all. No explanation of how. No acknowledgement of the scale of what had been done. Just a conclusion. The war, it seemed, was over. Celebrations erupted across the Concord. Worlds that had prepared for annihilation now lit their skies with signals of survival. Civilizations that had faced extinction began the long process of rebuilding. Trade routes reopened. Communication networks stabilized. For the first time in generations, the galaxy could breathe. But beneath the relief, something lingered. A question no one could ignore. What had humanity actually done? The Concord requested access to former Devourer systems for study. Humanity did not refuse. But what they found only deepened the unease. There were no bodies, no wreckage, no evidence of battle. Devourer structures had been dismantled at a molecular level. Materials broken down, repurposed, or simply removed. Even the residual energy signatures, the faint traces that should have remained after such a vast presence, were gone. Erased. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Erased. It was a level of precision the Concord could barely comprehend. They didn't just win, one scientist said during analysis. They cleaned. The word spread quickly. Cleaned. As if the Devourers had been nothing more than a contamination. Something to be removed. Something to be forgotten. And then came the reports. Scattered. Inconsistent. Unverified. Sightings of figures at the edges of known space. Unidentified signals that appeared and vanished without pattern. Moments where entire sensor arrays flickered, as if something had passed through them undetected. The Annihilators had not all returned. Humanity confirmed as much, briefly, and without elaboration. Some assets remained deployed for observation. Observation of what? No answer was given. The implication was clear enough. The galaxy was safe. For now. But it was also being watched. Not by the Concord. Not by any known species. But by something humanity had created. The High Council requested one final clarification. A single question, sent directly to Earth. Are the Annihilators under your control? The response came without delay. Yes. A pause. Then, a second line appeared. They were designed that way. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Because control implied the possibility of losing it. And if that ever happened, the consequences were unthinkable. In the months that followed, humanity began recalling its deployed units. One by one, the scattered signals disappeared. The faint traces of their presence faded. The anomalies in sensor readings ceased. Order returned. Structure. Predictability. But not completely. There were still gaps. Still moments where something felt off. Still regions of space where instruments behaved unpredictably, where data didn't quite align, where something might still be out there, watching, waiting, ensuring. The Concord adjusted. Policies changed. Military doctrines evolved. New protocols were established, not just for external threats, but for internal understanding. Because the galaxy had learned something fundamental. War was no longer what it had been. There were no longer lines to hold, no longer battles to win. Because if a threat rose to a certain level, humanity would not fight it. They would remove it, completely, silently, and without question. In a final address to the Concord, humanity spoke only once more on the matter. The message was brief, measured, unapologetic. You asked for soldiers. We ensured survival. Understand this. We do not fight wars. We finish them. The transmission ended. No further statements followed. And across the galaxy, in systems once touched by the shadow of extinction, a new kind of peace settled. Not one born of victory, but of certainty. Because every civilization now understood the same truth. If darkness ever rose again, humanity would answer. And when they did, there would be nothing left to threaten the stars. Only silence.